What's good, YouTube? YouTube. Listen, a lot of you on Facebook. There's going to be more people on my YouTube. People who I've been on YouTube for 10 years. So most of my customers, they're on YouTube. They stay on YouTube throughout this whole cast. They ask me questions, just like you can. You can ask me questions through Facebook on the comment section. Make sure you like and subscribe and press the share button. That's the one way you help us on this COVID-19 coronavirus stuff that's going on. Shout out to everybody out there. Shout out to the people on YouTube coming up. I'm just going to go live. I don't really care how many people are here on YouTube because we're going to just get right to the program. Eventually, people will jump in. We're going to talk about what we're going to talk about. Don't be scammed. What you need is just a change of plans. Coming up right now. Get that cash. Oh, get it fast, get it fast. GizzyCredit. Oh, what's up, YouTube? Let me put this on right now. Hey. Okay, that's it. No more. Jay, how you doing?
Good, you?
Good. Over here, trying to get this started over here on YouTube and Facebook. Got a lot of people on Facebook today. They're probably gonna leave, but it's fine. We get most of our views on YouTube. Oh, okay. Sorry about that. Anyways, John is my partner with Credit Repairs. We've been helping people for a long time together. I've been doing credit repair for 10 years, and I've been partnering up with him since 2012. So right now, we have about 8 years working together. It's nothing but integrity, communication, taking a stand for our customers, letting them know what can be done and what will be done. So right now, we are experiencing some time with, some people, they're experiencing some rough time. Not that we're having a hard time, because we are more busy than we used to be. Is that right, John?
Yeah. I mean, I think that it's just the time of year too. I mean,
yeah, that's true.
This time of year is typically fairly busy for us, and most businesses coming out of the Christmas, and then with tax return money coming in and things like that, it helps to provide some liquidity to the environment. But I think right now, more so than ever, given what's going on, geopolitically, just with this whole virus, I think that there's an absolute need for some people just to capitalize on some of the opportunities that are going to start to present themselves. So I think it's probably a convolution of things, the tax return, the time of year, and the fact that opportunities are starting to present themselves that people want to be able to jump on and capitalize on, and they need to get this done in order to be able to capitalize on any of the opportunities.
Yes, especially right now with this rate drop, and a lot of people seem not to quite understand. They think that they're gonna have zero interest rate on their mortgage for 30 years.
Unfortunately, that's not the case. The banks still have to make money, but I think right. The one thing, because we get all different kinds of clients that come through, and you've been making these podcasts now for a couple months, and we've got a number of them. We get different people at different points in their lives, or different understandings of credit and all those kinds of things. We have some people that are already in properties, and I've had clients reach out over the last. It's grown more aggressive as this whole pandemic has really heightened. But
yes.
Reaching out, asking about when's the right time to refinance. Now that rates are dropping, should refinance. Now, again, with the Fed funds rate getting dropped, that's going to drop the mortgage rate ever so slightly, right? So, I mean, I think as of late last week, the 30-year was like 3.25. Now, even with the drop, it might drop another hair or so once it bakes into the system. But I mean, I think people need to understand, if you're currently somebody that took out a mortgage, let's just say last year, and your interest rate was 4.25%. Or let's say 4, because I don't think it ever got up to 4.25%. Let's say a year ago it was 4, and now it's 3.25%, and you basically have 75 basis points difference between then and now.
Okay.
Does it make sense for you to actually go forward with the refinance? And you really got to ask yourself based on the closing costs and everything else, because in essence, the only thing that's going to adjust is the principal interest part of your payment. So whatever nowadays most banks escrow for your real estate taxes, all banks, so actually for your real estate taxes and for your mortgage insurance and for your homeowners insurance. So, the only number that's really going to drop there would be the principal and interest payment. So let's just say, for argument's sake, I was talking to a woman today, a client that she's got a $500,000 mortgage, right? She's got a $200,000 mortgage, probably worth $500,000. The interest rate she's in right now is 4.5%, and she's been paying on it for almost like 11 or 12 years. So she's getting to the point, as we talked about in previous podcasts, all loans, any kind of loan, an auto loan, mortgage, personal loan, etc., they're all front loaded with interest, meaning that the banks put their interest on the front side. They front load all their interest. So on the back side of any loan, the last 2, 3, 4 years on an auto loan, personal loan, etc., on a mortgage, the last 10, 15 years of it, if it's a 30-year, it's going to be mostly and almost entirely principal, right? So
a lot of people don't know that when you start off a loan, you start paying interest. People think that they just start making payments and that's it.
No. They do start making payments and that's it, but they just don't understand that the breakdown deviates, right? So let's just say, for argument's sake, you're making a personal loan payment of $560. Your interest rate is 17%, right? Chances are about 85 to 90% of that payment is going to go towards interest for the first, let's say it's a 5-year term, for the first 3 years of that loan. 80 to 85% of that payment of $500 is going to go towards principal. The last 2 years, it's going to slowly start to deviate. So it's going to go from 80% towards interest, over to, the opposite end by the time you get to the 4th and 5th year of the loan, so that the loan's paid in full and the bank gets all their interest. They do this obviously because they want to make sure they're paid if the loan goes bad. So they're going to collect their interest on the front side, which is going to hedge them the total amount of the loan. When you go and you refinance on a mortgage, obviously you're resetting that amortization. So, for instance, this woman today was, she was like 12 years into the loan, and she wanted to drop her interest rate like a point, maybe a point and a quarter, which would have dropped her payment maybe like $150 roughly. But the problem with that is she would have added onto the principal. So she would have added approximately 3 or 4% onto the $200,000 mortgage, which would have been $6,000 or $7,000 additional, which are closing costs. It would have went on top of the principal. Along with that, she would have reset the amortization, which I was just describing. So she would have been back at year 1 on that mortgage. Right, she's older. She's in her 50s or 60s. She would have been at year 1 on that mortgage, and the reality of the situation, she would effectively have been the first, another 10, 12 years, she would have been paying all the principal the interest front loaded. So I think a lot of this stuff people don't entirely understand with these mortgages. Just because the rate drops doesn't always mean if you can get a better rate that's somehow going to save you money. In some cases, especially if you've been far down the amortization line and you reset that, you're actually hurting yourself, because the more principal that goes towards the loan amount, the better position you're in at that point. In essence, if you're saving $100, you may be hurting yourself, because that $100 may end up being backwards, as opposed to if you reset the amortization and more of your payments going to interest rather than principal. So it ends up being very difficult for the average individual. And honestly, a lot of mortgage brokers are just all about turning business, so they don't even explain this. Some of them may not even understand it or even care either way. But I mean, there's unless there's a significant dip that can offset the amount of money you're adding onto the principal and basically where you're at in the amortization schedule, it really might not make a ton of sense if you're only dropping it 3/4 of a point. If you talk to any mortgage lender, they'll say 75 basis points or 3/4 of a percentage point is typically where what you should utilize as a barometer as far as should you refinance. But it's a very vague scenario, because you're not taking into consideration the closing costs that are coming on top of any of the other variables I just discussed. So I think for most people, doing some of that extra legwork would probably obviously help. Now, granted, if you did buy a year ago, obviously you're still on the early side of the amortization schedule, so you're still going to be front loaded. You're just resetting that. So, I mean, you just need to see at that point if the closing costs, however many you're going to have to accumulate in order to get it done, which is typically in most cases 2 to 3% of the loan amount. So
wow, that's the closing cost?
In a lot of cases, yeah, because you got to redo your escrows, you got to pay the real estate taxes, you got to do the title insurance again, you got to do whatever fees the bank charges. It's all redone, for the most part.
So it's best if the customer or the person has equity in the house.
You have to have equity to do a refinance. So I mean, there's really no 97% refinance.
So what's for you when you look at a file and you look at people's situation? What is a good not estimate, but if like, is there a threshold that you don't go and say, well, it's not going to be a good deal for you because you only have $30,000 built into equity? How much equity do you think a house needs to have in order for it to be doable for them? Or does it have to do a lot of things?
Typically speaking, yeah. I mean, you can get 90-95% you can refinance out of, right? And it really breaks down to the bottom line, though, where they're sitting on principal and interest. Like, look, if you're somebody that's been paying your loan down, let's just say you had a $100,000 mortgage and you've been paying your loan down for 15 years, your property appreciated, and now you can get your PMI off because you've had PMI on there. And then you got to really put pen to paper and get to the bottom of it and see, okay, you know what, if you do a re-am and you start back at the first year of a mortgage, but you're going to take away your, let's just say $150 in PMI, and you're going to drop your payment $150, and the interest rate, whatever the case may be, is going to come down with it, and then you make the determination that actually makes sense, then it might be the right move at that point, even though you're restarting the calculator on the amortization. But in a lot of cases, though, unless it's a pretty big, significant difference on the interest and you've been paying down on, and you get on the back end of an amortization schedule, you're really doing yourself a disservice. If you want to make additional payments, you can do it at that point. It's all going towards principal. You're really not paying any interest when you get to the backside. There's very little on the backside of a mortgage. So, because most people refinance their mortgages within 5 years of getting them, so they don't ever really see that, right? The average person lives in the house for like 5 years, right?
7 years, yes.
Yeah, something like that. So, I mean, it's rare that a lot of people run into this situation, but there are some people that do, right? I mean, that's why we're talking about it. There's some people that do, and they need to take that into consideration. That goes the same for an auto loan or a personal loan. It's the same scenario, and it's a lot of things people don't understand how they front load the interest so that they make sure they get their money. Now, again, it's also important at the same time for people to realize, just because you're getting a smaller rate does not always mean it's going to translate to an enormous change in your payment, right? I mean, you got to really determine with the amount of principal. If you're saving $100 a month because you dropped your $400,000 mortgage 0.25%, right? Roughly, you have to ask yourself for 2 or 3% in closing costs. That's an extra $8,000 to $11,000 you're adding onto your principal. At $100 a month, it's going to take you you effectively $1,200 a year at $100 a month savings. It's going to be 10, 11 years before you pay that back, right? So does it make sense to do it if the savings that you're making a month of $100 over the course of a year is $1,200, you're paying $11,000 or $12,000 in closing costs on that scenario? It doesn't make sense to do it, right? Because you're effectively hurting yourself at that point. So these are some of the things we help clients with, and at the same time, it's things that clients need to take into consideration that don't even realize, right?
Yeah, but this is also what happens too, Jay. We help people get into situations. I know you had your customers in the last 5 years that when you start their credit, they have stellar credit. They get put into an excellent position. Now they need to refinance, but life happened during those 5 years. People get divorced, bankruptcy, people have negative credit. Right. And if you want to refinance, you got to have good credit.
Yeah, so I mean, I feel like right now, because rates are so low, people are refinancing more aggressively, right? And we've been in a low interest rate environment now for the last 15 years, and who knows if that's going to change? But I don't think it's definitely not going to change anytime soon. I don't think it's going to change for a long time, in my personal opinion. But yeah, sure, people need to have good credit in order to be able to refinance, and a lot of people want to tap into it to get equity back out as well, right? If they can, for any number of reasons, or open up a line of credit or whatever the case may be. And the credit does need to be stellar. Yes. And, we live in an environment where people over leverage, right? And that's part of the reason why, look, there's a lot of similarities between consumers and how they run their stuff and they over leverage, and businesses, right? Because there's just so much credit and debt in the system right now that you can tap into, whether it be from a business perspective or you're an individual. So people end up over leveraging because they're living outside of their means and they're basically financing things that they can't afford on low documentation scenarios. And at the same time, you see the way the stock market is. It's we're dealing in an environment where businesses are over leveraged, right? So when you run into a little bit of a rough patch like this with this virus that may run into 2 quarters or 3 quarters, you see a situation where the market's completely unwinding because they don't know if these companies can sustain it. And these are Fortune 500 companies. These are hundreds of $billion market cap that we're not sure they can make it 2 months without making the same amount of money they made 2 months before. It's insane. It's insane to think about, right? I mean, they're needing bailouts from government in order to be able to give investors peace of mind that they're going to be able to survive. Now, it's the same thing with the consumer. You deal in the same environment, just that they over lever, and over a period of time, any sort of shake to the left or shake to the right causes such a reverberation with them because they're just so over levered that can't have any disruptions. Everything needs to be run exactly right, that they run into problems again. And then that's when they come back to us and we get them back in a position to do what it is they need to do. And look, the one good thing about a lot of the clients that we have and we've had over however many years, like you said, is we don't have a high return rate, right? So what we do, meaning like, let's just say we have 100% of clients over 10, just for argument's sake, we've helped over 10 years, close to 10,000 clients. So out of 10,000 clients, I would say less than 10% of them come back, which means that obviously the clients that come through us learn a lot when they come through to us, right? We still keep in touch with them. The ones we help, they come back and ask questions about financing and stuff. So it's not like they don't come back to us because they don't want to, or because it was negative leaving after we cleaned them up. It's because they learned a lot in the process. They were able to understand what needs to be done. They were able to get a very firm understanding of what they need to do going forward, and they don't want to do it again. So it's a situation where we get a very small comeback, and when we do, we're happy to help, obviously. But the point I'm trying to make is that in situations where people over lever, they come to us. Correct. And ultimately they go back and they understand they were over levered. They understand the adjustments they need to make when they get back on their feet so that they'll run into the situation again. So it's a compliment, in my opinion, to us in the fact that, we're also helping people understand and learn while they're doing this, while they're going through this process, this credit process, so that they can actually get, an education on the run while things are actually getting repaired. So it's kind of a dual purpose.
So these the 500 billion, right? They pumped
700 billion.
700 billion. Didn't we get bailed out with 700 or 800 in 2008?
It was like close to 800, yeah. But it was a little bit different. This is a different situation, and this is going to require, because you're dealing in a situation right now where there's just a giant question mark on everything. Right. I mean, unfortunately, we're not China. We can't lock people in hotels and bolt the windows and the doors and keep them in there, right? And just isolate them that way. So effectively, what we're trying to do as a government, as a civilization, is have people stay in their own house. They don't, if they do have it, which nobody knows if they do because there's not enough tests in this country. If they do, they keep it to themselves and they're not out, spreading it aggressively, which obviously that'll turn into wildfire. So it turns into a situation where we're effectively quarantining ourselves, and only going out when we need to, and only doing this, that, and the other thing. So in essence, to try and establish some level for it to start to peter out, right? And when it starts to peter out, then that's going to give the stock market a little bit of an idea on a worst case scenario, best case scenario, and start to actually set expectations. Right now, there is no expectation. There's zero. They're assuming the worst. And today was just a sell off of. I mean, it was like a puke. I mean, there wasn't one positive about this entire day today. It was like a vomit of selling. I mean, it was selling all day long. I mean, last night when the futures market opened, they closed it. It literally was open for 10 minutes. The Fed released it on purpose at like 10:06. The Fed released a statement stating they were dropping the rates and they were pumping $700 billion into the market, right? They assumed that was going to help quell the markets and help calm people down and let them know that they're there to support it. The problem is when the market's open, the dump limit down, meaning there's a 5% when the futures drop 5%, meaning like the 5% of its the future value for whether it be the S&P or the Dow, they stop trading on that. They don't let you trade on that anymore.
Wow.
So it's a circuit breaker. So it literally in 10 minutes after opening at 6:30 yesterday, it hit the limit. So it didn't open again until this morning when the market actually opened. And when the market opened, it went down and triggered another circuit breaker at 7%, which then, it went all the way down. The Dow was down close to, within the first half an hour today, it was down close to 3,000. Now it closed where it got down. It ended up closing today where it ended up getting down to. But I mean, look, it's getting crazy because you're starting to see just the mania and hysteria is just gripping.
Yes.
Everywhere, right? I mean, it's just everywhere. I mean, it's crazy because people just are, there's people that are just naturally anxious human beings, right? And they can't. A lot of this is foreign to them, the financial side of it, and it's understandable, right?
Yes.
But you have people going out and buying water, like emptying. This isn't a natural disaster. I don't know, why is anybody buying water? Everybody's water still runs. Nobody's shutting off the water. Everybody still got filters on their sinks. I mean, I don't understand why people are out buying water, what the significance. I understand the toilet paper. I understand the paper towels. I just want to make sure they're stocked up. I don't get the water. And when you start seeing things like that, and
water, you could just boil.
What's that?
Water from the faucet, you just boil it.
You don't even need to boil it. You can just, look, refrigerators nowadays have filtered water on it. I mean, if you don't, you can get a filter for your faucet. It's like $3. You can get it at Walmart or the grocery store. You put it on your faucet. It cleans the water right there. It's just going. It's insane to just see the level of mania that's going on. And what's ended up happening is that you have smaller businesses that are getting, in hospitality and travel and even like things like we have a friend of ours that does my kid's best friend, his parents are personal trainers on Palm Beach Island over here, and I mean they pretty much, Palm Beach Island's just all 60, 70-year-old people. I mean, those people aren't, they're leaving. They're going back up to their compounds up north, and that's it, right? That's the end of it. They're not staying down here. They're going to go isolate themselves, and it pretty much is shutting down like mom and pop shops. Right?
Oh yeah.
And you're seeing that everywhere, though, right? You see that everywhere. You see that with every walk in the retail sector, because now they don't want people leaving the house, right? So you're going to see gas stations get it. You're going to see. I mean, just look around. I mean, they're basically telling people not to leave the house. The only things that are really thriving right now that are making a lot of money are, the retailers that are selling this stuff, because that's the only thing. When I'm talking from a retail perspective. That's the only thing that people are buying right now. It's the only thing they care to spend money on, and they're probably overspending on it. So,
correct.
Without getting too much on that kind of a crazy, because I could talk. I mean,
that's the reality of things, though.
No, it isn't. And every day it gets a little. Every day you don't think it can get crazy. Every day it gets a little crazier. I mean, it really does. It every day it gets just a tick crazier. I mean, it's like nothing I've ever seen before, or probably will ever see again. I just, the fact how it's, and for all intents and purposes, again, I'm not trying to downplay it. We know so little about it, right? About the virus as a whole. I mean, other than the obvious thing that it affects the elderly and it's people with existing conditions and, obviously to a certain degree of symptoms, but it's just so unusual to me that it's already been through a number of countries, China being one of them. Italy's been there for a good month now. Yes. I mean, and we still are so gray on the issue of it, and that's the problem. And that's why, going back to the stock market, the stock market despises uncertainty, right? So when there's an uncertain anything, where there's not any definitiveness around anything, it's going to continue to languish, because it just makes people, it ticks up the fear, it ticks up the fear, it ticks up the fear. And then things like that cause just a complete unwind, which is what has gone on for what feels like an eternity, but it's been like 3 weeks. So, I mean, it's been crazy, but I mean, hopefully, and it didn't help today that Trump came out and said that, this thing won't pass until August. So
like if they want to keep us like with that mentality that things are not going to get better until.
Well, look. Yeah, but I don't think that's what he wants. I got to tell you, I just, not that I'm defending him, I'm just saying that he's got a presidential campaign he's got to renew. Correct. This goes to August, and then the vote is in November. Can you imagine how difficult that's going to be? Because if the market's just getting back to its feet in the summer, and it's just finding a footing, or it just bottoms out, and he's got to somehow get a vote in November, it's going to be very difficult. Not to mention, how is he going to be able to campaign in 2 months, right? I mean, I know he does all these random ones here. And I'm just saying that there's nothing, I find no benefit to him in this process, right? I just don't see how he'd be able to benefit. All it's doing is muddying what was probably previously a much clearer water that he was probably walking into that's now been completely muddied, and it's going to be problematic if it does go into the summer, although I don't think it's going to. I think there's going to be some delineation before that, and I think things will probably clarify before that, but I think for once he's not giving the best case scenario, right? So, and I think that's probably better,
Just imagine how many people, like right now though, I got a post on Facebook that someone wrote that a mortgage person was going to save the customer $300 because the rate dropped, and she said, "Yo, I could save you $300 right now. Will you go for the mortgage?" And the guy's like, "Nah, I'm gonna wait until it's lower." Do you think there's any possibility with people right now who are in the mortgage process to be like, "No, I'm just gonna wait"?
There's always people like that. Yeah, they're the same people that they wait too long when they're selling an asset and they sell too early. Or they wait too long to sell an asset and they just do everything in reverse. They get greedy, right? And then that's just what it is. Because honestly, the difference between 3.25% and 3% on any mortgage is nominal. Right. So, I mean, if you're trying to squeeze out an extra 25 basis points, it's not going to, even if it's $1 million mortgage, it's going to end up being nominal, relatively speaking. If it's a $100,000 mortgage, it's going to be much less, obviously. But compared to, the amount of closing costs you're going to pay to get it to tick down a little bit, that's just a vanity play, right? There's nothing, that's just a talking point, because honestly, again, we talked about this in the last one. They're not going. The mortgage rates are not going to zero. If you guys want to do a little bit of investigative journalism, who's ever listening to this, go and look at some of the countries like Germany and some of these other countries where they have negative interest rates. See what their borrowing cost is on mortgages, right? And it's not zero, even though they have negative interest rates on the money that the government that you lend to the government. I mean, it's not zero on the borrowing rate because the banks still have to make money. They're not a nonprofit organization. They have to build in a yield spread there for themselves in order to be able to A, service it because they service it for investors, and B, the investor needs to make money and it's got to track inflation. So, I mean, you're dealing in a situation where it's not ever going to be the exact number. I mean, it's absurd to think, but this is what I'm saying. This is the type of stuff that happens where people get a little piggish, right? Like they see an opportunity and they think they got a leg up on it. They think they understand it. And they push it too hard, and then they end up getting bit. Bulls eat, bears eat, pigs get slaughtered. That's the term. And you end up seeing it all the time, and it's ridiculous. It's unnecessary. So, to answer the question, I do think rates could tick lower. I don't think you're going to get, like I said, I think late last week I saw the 7-year on around 2.25, which is insanely low. I don't think I saw the 30-year 3.25. I don't think you get much. Maybe could you get high 2s? Potentially. I think anybody that thinks we're going much lower than high 2s, I think they don't understand how the cost associated with these loans and the amount of money that needs to be made on these loans between the servicing and everything like that. Because honestly, if you had a loan taken out for Chase Bank, for argument's sake, and it's a Fannie Freddie conventional loan, Chase turns around and sells that loan to Fannie and Freddie. And then they service it. So they take like 0.75 percentage point, 75 to 80 basis points of that spread. They keep themselves to service it. That's their fee for servicing. So, when you're calling Chase to pay the bill, Chase is just the one collect. They're just the customer service at that point. They're not the owner of the debt. Fannie and Freddie are. They're just the front man because Fannie and Freddie doesn't want to be out arguing with people. So they take 0.75 or almost 80 cents on that, 80 basis points of that, let's just say 2% rate. So let's just say it can get down to 2.9, which it may. I mean, I don't think that's crazy. That leaves roughly 2% before fees and any other costs that were associated with it for the investor to make. Well, and inflation typically tracks about 1.25. So you're talking about, in essence, they're making pre-tax in that situation like 75 basis points or 0.75%. That's almost nothing. For an investment of let's just say you take a mortgage out for $400,000. Yes. So there's got to be some element of reward there, right? So it's not ever going to go down to zero on a mortgage. And honestly, we talked about this last time. It's on the personal loan and the credit card side and all those other sides. You're talking about a situation where those rates are subjective and they're not coming down. I mean, the prime on an unsecured loan right now, I know that Lending Club and Prosper, they all say, yeah, rates as low as 5%. Try and find somebody that got a 5% rate from Lending Club or Prosper or one of those companies. You're never going to see it. It's going to be somebody that borrows $1,000 and has a 900 credit score and makes $1 million, right? There's no risk to that. Most prime rates on unsecured loans, personal loans, start around 9-10%. And it's been like that, regardless of rates dropping. It's been like that for 6-7 years. And they go high. And a lot of people listening to this are probably taking loans out because it just is what it is. And they've probably seen that they're probably borrowing at 12. If they got good credit, 11-12%. If not, it moves up aggressively from there, as high as, and banks make a ton of money on them. A ton of money on them. Now, it's commensurate with the risk because you're not giving them any collateral. Along the same lines, I mean, there's got to be a calculation to the risk. So as a means of understanding it, that's kind of where it breaks down. But yeah, I do think I do think that people can be piggish in regards to this stuff, and I absolutely guarantee that there's people that are backing out of the refis now because they think it's going to drop lower because the market's dumping, and they think that's automatically going to pass through simultaneously to the 30-year, and unfortunately, it just doesn't work like that.
So get what you can right now. And
well, look, here's what I don't want to interrupt you, but I just want to be clear. So on a purchase, right? Because I've been talking with clients for the last week and a half about these. If you're refinancing, I think refinancing now is good because you can lock in your equity, right? Yeah. You can lock in your equity. Obviously, the lower the debt to income, the lower the LTV on the property, the less risk it is to the bank. The more they're willing to drop the rate because the less the risk. So if you have a property that's worth $100,000 and you owe right now, let's say right now it's worth $100,000 and you owe 70, then you're at about 70% loan to value. You're under the 80%. You avoid the PMI. It's a comfortable loan to value for the bank. They're going to want that deal very much. Now, let's just say 4 or 5 months from now, the market continues to dump and real estate prices drop, and that $100,000 price drops to, which by all means it very easily could, $85,000, right? Well, your loan to value ratio goes from 70% to roughly 85, 88%, right? Totally different conversation. Now you have PMI. Now your debt to income is going to come into play because the bank's not so comfortably levered, right? It's going to come into much more play in those kinds of situations. You're going to have added costs, like I said earlier, the PMI, which is going to get played into your debt to income. So I would say anybody that wants to refi now. Anybody that wants to buy, I would wait. There is absolutely no rush to buy right now. None.
No rush. Because
if you're buying right now, there's more legs to this whole unwinding. And like I talked about last time, moving real estate is more like, dropping real estate prices is more like an aircraft carrier moving while stocks can do it overnight.
Yes.
Real estate prices just take a little bit longer to turn around, but when they do, it catches some pretty significant momentum. Same way it does in the opposite direction when you're gentrifying a neighborhood or you're building up a neighborhood. Once that engine gets going, it moves pretty quick once it gets going. Well, that happens with real estate in the other direction too. And if you want to, again, check it out, go look at 07, 08, and look at some of the markets like Florida and Arizona and Las Vegas and DC and all these other areas. And even the traditionally conservative areas got hit 20%, right, from highs.
Yes.
And some of the other ones got hit 60, 70%. Now, I'm not saying it's going to be like that. I'm just saying that who wants to buy now?
There's mad people who want to buy now, especially in Jersey. Go ahead.
Let me just finish for a second. So who wants to buy now if you're going to, if real estate prices are going to drop and rates are going to continue to at least stay where they're at, if not get slightly lower, right? Because they're not going up anytime soon. You can assure yourself of that. So if real estate prices are going to come down, all you're doing is putting yourself in a better position, right? Plus, you're going to potentially build yourself in with some equity. But, at the end of the day, which there's no downside to that, right? A property that might have been worth $400,000 6 months ago is now worth $300,000, and you're getting an offer at $300,000. I mean, that's at the same low rate that you're going to get a $400,000, maybe a tick lower. I mean, you can't beat that. But go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No. I was just going into that conversation where, a lot of people want to buy. Here in Jersey, people are fighting for a house. You have an open house and there's 30 people that show up and there's like 5 people who bid and they upbid. But not with this.
Overbid. Yeah, they're the ones. Yeah, and it's terrible. And unfortunately, it ends up being a situation. And depending on the area of Jersey, like you get up North Jersey, they're high-priced houses, right?
Yes.
They're expensive houses. So they're also the ones that when prices drop, they're the ones that have to drop the most, because a 10% drop, although it's relative, a 10% drop in $100,000 house is $10,000, right?
Yes.
10% drop in $1 million house is $100,000 loss, right? Both being levered to the same degree, though, right? You know, you're still levered at the same 95 to 97% on both properties. So it's hurting the $1 million one more, right? Because in essence, it's just the law of large numbers. So when you see that drop happen, it's going to feel more on the $1 million mortgage, not only because the size of the mortgage and the amount of the payment, but just sheer the law of large numbers and how you're getting impacted that way. So, I mean, I just think that now is not the right time to buy. It will be. You know, there will be opportunities that present themselves down the line. I just think buying right now on the first day of a sell-off is not meaning like real as first, because real estate moves slower. So the market's been dropping for 3 weeks. So just now is when it's starting to turn in that direction, right? Like I was saying with the aircraft carrier.
Yes.
Just starting to turn. It's just starting to turn. So slowly, you'll see it start to dump out. I mean, it's inevitable. And people will buy through it. I mean, I watched people buy through it in 07, 08, you know, because it's part of their business. But then what ends up happening, like what I talked about last week, is slowly you'll start to see the banks contract the capital. And honestly, I got news for you. If you follow the market, you understand that the banks just yesterday announced, last night before the market opened, that they're not doing their stock buybacks anymore because they wouldn't have the money available to loan to small businesses that are being impacted by this. So their sole focus right now is to try and contribute. You know, they're not, although business as usual with the mortgage and stuff, I'm just saying I wouldn't expect any growth from that perspective. So, and I would absolutely expect a lot of risk to be taken off the table from a banking perspective. So I just think that people should be more aware of the fact that there's a strong possibility you're going to start to see, and just look at it from a fear perspective. You know, I mean, there's so many people right now that are just literally stifled with fear. Imagine if you're somebody that had a house on the market. You originally started marketing it at $500,000. It's been on the market 4 months now, and you're down to $400,000, right?
Yes.
Imagine what you're going to be willing to do now. You know the market's dumping, and you're watching TV every day, and and you can't leave your house, right? Because you were effectively quarantined. So you just have to watch all day long because there's no sports on. So you have to just sit and watch all day long, watch the market dump, and all you're thinking about is this house that you haven't been able to sell. What's going to happen now?
Yes.
First thing you're going to do is drop the price more, right? But you're going to drop it, if you can, aggressively, just to get out from underneath it, because now the fear is just annihilating you, right?
Yes.
As far as just tearing you up. Well, there's going to be a lot of those opportunities. You know, there's going to be people that just came on the market that want to get rid of it, and people that have been on the market forever. And that number is only going to get less. You know, that number is only going to continue to drop. So that's why I'm saying it's not on a refi. I would absolutely do it now in the event that real estate prices drop, right? You don't want to lose the equity and the potential better terms that you could capitalize on the refi, plus get a lower rate. But on the purchase, man, you got time. And I think a lot of good opportunities are going to start to present themselves as a result.
How many months do you think?
Well, honestly, it really breaks down, because I don't think, look, although I think we find a bottom, and although I think that we can stabilize at some point in time once this gets addressed, I don't think people just come out the next day and start buying cars again, right? Like I just don't see that happening.
People are going to start thinking what's really important to me.
Well, they're going to come and look, like any major scenario that occurs to us. In the moment, it's all happening so quickly, right? It all happens so quickly. You don't really get time to digest the actual thing that went on. Like that whole collapse in 07, 08, that took like 2.5 years, right? So people got the full digest of that, right? While it was going on, after it went on, etc. This has gone on for 3 weeks. This is the third week, like a little over 3 weeks now. It's just been a monsoon that has run through our entire economy, and it's still developing. So you're right. People are going to come out the other side of this, and they're going to be like, how do I prevent myself from being exposed to something like that again?
Yes.
Right? And they're not going to be able to have an answer, because nobody could have predicted that. Right? I mean, nobody could have predicted that, and nobody wants to be quarantined in their house, and nobody wants to be fighting people at the supermarket to get rolled toilet paper. Right? I mean, it's ridiculous. So, I mean, and it's just these things that you're not going to be able to prepare for, but I think you're going to come out of the other side of it much more cautious, right? You're not. It's going to be. It's good. There's going to be a period, I think, even after we arrive at that it's just going to be a de-thawing, right? Like a psychological de-thawing of like what just happened. You know, because there's a lot of people that are getting impacted financially right now. There's going to be fallout from that. I don't care. The government can pump $10 trillion into the economy. That in large part that ends up helping Fortune 500 companies, right? Like large companies that are publicly traded. In a lot of cases, it's utilized for the purposes of stabilize economic markets and to keep business as usual, right? Or try and stabilize business as usual. That's not helping the small mom and pop shop, right? It's doing nothing for them. If people can't leave their house, let's just say they own a pizza shop, right? People aren't leaving their house, and people are just sitting in. They don't want to. They're just overly anxious about not wanting to coincide with anyone else or anyone's hands on things. So germ aware, they're going to feel it so badly. They're not going to get any bailout.
Yeah.
And if credit markets tighten up, it's going to be very difficult for them to tap into those credit markets, right? Even on a small business side. So I'm just saying that I think that even after this whole thing gets stabilized,
well,
I think that
we have a customer or soon-to-be customer who just hit me up. He probably hit me up because of the stuff that's going on now. He's probably trying to get a loan, but he has, Jersey, the mayor of Hoboken. He's shutting restaurants down. You can only take out or order to take out or delivery. All right, so we have.
But see, just think about that for a second, right? Think about that.
Correct.
So the restaurant business is one of the toughest businesses to succeed at, right? Your margins are razor thin. There's constantly a float of money that you're trying to deal with. Imagine telling them you got to shut down for 2 weeks. I mean, some of these guys they work 7 days a week in order to keep it open, and now you're telling them they're closed for 2 weeks. I mean, how do you even come back from that? Let alone 2 months, let alone 3. You know what I mean? Like, how do you even come back from that in that kind of a situation without shutting doors? That's what I'm saying. There's going to be so much fallout as a result of this that it's not even funny. I mean, you're effectively forcing everybody to stay inside. So anybody that owns a storefront or a retail-related business is going to get torched. It's inevitable. I mean, if you're telling people, listen, if you stay in your house, you're safe. Don't leave your house. You leave your house, you're unsafe. Effectively what they're saying, right? Like that's effectively what's being told and conveyed. Well, then how is any retail business going to actually make money? And if you go back to what I was explaining earlier, historically, January, February, halfway through January into the end of January, all the way through to about the end of April, beginning of May, is normally a pretty strong season. That's like the strongest part of the season because of tax return money. And people normally by the end of January, February have thawed out from Christmas and stuff like that. So there's a number of variables typically economically that come into play there that make it a really good season for retailers and such, right? Just in general, because there's
just look at this is St. Patrick's week.
Yeah, I mean that's all.
This is when they make their most money, and you got to shut down bars on the day that you make the most money out of the year.
But see, this is what I'm saying. It's affecting everyone. That's why I said it's just gotten so out of hand. I mean, I don't know if I necessarily agree with. I don't know if I necessarily agree with this scorched earth approach at just basically compromising every single business and not giving them the opportunity to make their own decision, right? I mean, there should be some degree of option. Like, listen, if you're going to keep your business open, you have to do X, Y, or Z then. Right?
Yes.
It shouldn't be just you have to shut down and everybody's got to go inside. Because some people aren't looking at the situation the same way others are, right? Some people aren't taking this as serious as other people are taking it.
That's true.
And the reality of the situation is if you're a business owner and you're running your own business, you're not getting federal help. How are they telling you when you're closing your business? I understand it's a state of emergency and at the end of the day, the government makes a decision. But, I mean, you can't have all these funding packages and at the same time none of them are addressing the small guy, right? Which is typically how it ends up happening, right? It doesn't ever take into consideration the mom and pop shop or even the small / medium business that is a retailer or is in a particular area. So I just think there's going to be a lot of fallout from this, good, bad, whether it rectifies itself in the next 2 months or not.
Well, right now, someone just said the rich get richer, poor get poorer to the 10th degree.
Yeah, I mean, it just becomes a situation where and like I said before, it's ironic and I don't think coincidental that the last big issue was the financial crisis we had in 07, 08, right? That was one of these economic just gyrations that just completely annihilated markets, prices, asset prices, etc. And a lot of people learn from that period of time, right? There's a lot of smarter people now, that are doing what they need to do. It doesn't necessarily mean they're Harvard MBAs. I'm talking just people that have done their research to try and understand and get a better grip on why this happened, why that happens, etc. So it didn't come this time in the form of a financial crisis. And in large parts because corporate America did their job, consumers for the most part did their job. The problem is that the average wage in this country is like $55,000, right? I think so you're talking about a situation where people are forced to leverage, right? So even if they have a full understanding, knowledge of the situation, but they're being forced to leverage, then, it's just like these companies, like I was saying earlier, you take money out of their pocket 2, 3, 4 months. Man, they're just levered to that point to survive, to be able to keep up with how high the asset prices got so they can rent a place, to keep up with the car payment on the car, that new car loan that we talked about in the past. The average new car loan was $38,000, which is obscene, right? To think that somebody that's making $50,000 a year before taxes, the car that they're getting is a $38,000 car. It's almost as much as their salary, right? It's crazy. It's absurd. Correct. So you're dealing in a situation where now, when it starts to unwind, it's unwinding on a large scale, it's unwinding on a small scale. And I just think it's unfair that, you're seeing situations where I do think ultimately, and unfortunately, I hope it gets done quick so it reverts back and the people don't get
listen, the credit card companies, they're making money.
Oh yeah, the credit card companies are effectively the bank, right? So Capital One, they're making money, and some of the ones are Discover, and Capital One stocks are just getting torpedoed.
The hard part, though, Jay, is if people have low limit credit cards and they use their credit cards and they maxed out, then they're trying to refinance or they're trying to get something, but they're too much in debt. Their DTI is too high. Right.
So, did you say no limit credit cards? Is that what you said?
No, low limit.
Oh, low limit. Yeah, correct. So when they try and go back to the market to get money, the ratios are too high and banks don't want to lend to you when you look like you need money. They want to lend to you when you look like you don't have money, like you don't need the money. And the fact of the matter is now, so like I was saying earlier, you're going to see contraction. So they're going to get more picky in who those algorithms are going to get tighter. So they're going to be more picky in who they want to lend to in the first place, both business and personal. Things are going to have to tighten up significantly in people that are applying and things like that. And that's just effectively where it's going to go. It's not a question of if, it's when, whether or not we, recover here.
Well, isn't there a package for Small Business Administration that Trump just said? Is that going to be for manufacturing companies or is that going to be for the small guys, the pizzeria?
Yeah, but you got to understand like I was saying earlier, a lot of this stuff that gets passed legislatively, unfortunately, they don't keep track of it. You don't know. And honestly, at the end of the day, it's the banks that lend it. The SBA isn't lending it. The banks are the conduits that do all the underwriting and they get the approvals. Okay. So if a bank is cutting back on risk, they're going to cut back on risk in regards to this as well, Yeah. So it's not something that they're just going to turn around blind and just be like, yeah, we're lending it all out here. Sure, there might be money available there. There's always money available for the SBA. That was just an opportunity to try and quiet the market down. I believe they said that, the next bill they're trying to come up with is going to figure out a way to cut on. Schumer came out with a bill today that he's trying to propose that'll eliminate school loan payments for a period of time and discontinue all these other things that are effectively, we're turning into an entirely socialist government. Literally in a heartbeat, rather than a free market. But at the same time, it's all these things they're trying to throw at the market in a way to try and figure out how to just, stabilize it. But I don't know how you expect to stabilize a market that you have people hiding in their closets in their house, right? Eating toilet paper and paper towels. So I don't know how you can have it both ways and think that it's going to work. I just think you have such a disconnected group in Washington right now that's just not understanding that the hysteria that the media is creating is what's driving this. And as a result of that, until that hysteria dies down, it's going to continue to just run. It's crazy.
Yes, someone just said, from everything I've been reading, we were already heading into a recession and the coronavirus just sped it up.
Well, I don't, I don't know if we were headed for a recession. I think people were saying that as a result of the fact that, we were just so inflated for such a long period of time that was inevitable we were going to descend into a recession. But people have been calling for a recession for 3 years. I mean, they've been begging for one. If you remember back in 18, when the government was shut down and the market tanked then, everybody was begging for a recession then, and then it rallied another 40% from there. So, I mean, unfortunately, there's always bears that come out of the woodwork and want to, because that's their position, right? They want to be short of market. And asset values, in all honesty, were way overvalued then, and they were way overvalued when we topped out a couple weeks ago. So, I mean, this is a natural correction is a good thing. It's just when it comes like this.
Oh, yes.
It is, and this is why people always that have been through these financial crises, whether it be '08 or even older people that, you go back, these obviously aren't the only two that our economy's ever experienced.
Correct.
But the ones that buy when you're in here are the ones that end up being happy, right? The ones that don't, you always hear the stories. I remember growing up, I would hear these stories from different people. You'd be, I should have bought when this was there and this was there. And this, it's always, I should. And the hindsight's always 20/20, but they're just shitting themselves in the moment, right? And they don't want to do it because they get the opportunities that hurt the most are the ones that pay off the best. You understand what I mean?
Yes.
So I'm just saying that that's not me signing off on telling everybody to go out and buy stocks tomorrow and buy every piece of real estate you can find. I'm saying be tactical about it. We talked about it the last time. I think real estate has more room to drop, just like the stock market, has. And I think the stock market, will have some more room. But there's some incredible deals in the stock market right now. If you got any access to the markets, I mean, there's some incredible deals right now in the stock market. And I think they're only going to get even better. So, I mean, I definitely advise people to do your research. Don't do anything you don't understand. But, obviously wealth is made in our country through a number of vehicles. Two of the main ones are equities and real estate, right? So if you're not familiar with it, I obviously don't advise you to do it. But if you are, or you can familiarize yourself, you'll have some time to do so. So, and there's some, especially on the real estate side, you have some time, and it's a slower moving vehicle, and it may be a good place for a lot of people to start when this market starts to tap out. And you start to see values come back in real estate, it would be a good opportunity to get in because, there's a tremendous amount of tax advantages that real estate presents for people, both on the investment and the individual side. And, in a lot of cases, you make a lot of rental income that gets written down to almost nothing, and the banks add it back. So there's a tremendous amount of tax, along with the equity that you build and the net worth that comes along with it. There's a tremendous amount of tax advantage. So if your risk profile doesn't meet the stock market, definitely strongly advise people to start preparing for the real estate market to start falling further, and you can start capitalizing on some of those investments.
So whoever had money saved up, if they get educated, they're gonna eventually win.
Well, no, I mean, I think if they saved up money, and they were obviously smart if they did, and if they didn't get into the market yet, they obviously saw something they didn't like, or they thought prices were too high or values were too high, et cetera, which they would have been right about. Then if somebody's understanding enough of that, then they know that now's coming into a time, it's a good time to start buying. Now, I'm not saying today or tomorrow, but you're starting to get asset prices that have come down rather significantly on the stock side, and on the real estate side, they will continue to come down. And you'll be able to put some of that stuff to work, and that'll be generational, meaning like buy now at some of these lows, and then you just set it and forget it at that point, right? And you just let it grow. So, I mean, it depending on what your overall approach is and what your expectation is for that capital, but there is going to be some really good opportunities that come. And I said this last time too, and I say it again. Okay. There's just a lot of opportunities that will begin to start to present themselves on the real estate side.
With the real estate, whether it's for an investor or person, they're going to look at their
a primary residence as well. It's a great time for people that are out in the market trying to buy a house for their own house. It's not going to be an investment. I mean, look, in essence, everybody's home is an investment, right? You're just living in it. Yeah. And if you can buy it under the right circumstances, the right terms, and all that stuff, and you know what that property's worth in a good market, right? In a recovered market, in a recouped market, you're getting it at a discount. Well, then the equity's already built into it, right?
Yes.
So, I mean, it works both ways, both on the primary residence side and the investment side. Maybe it starts on the primary side and they parlay it into the investment side after they get familiar with it. It doesn't matter. It's just there's a lot of opportunities going to come around, and it's going to be opportunities that people can jump on.
So if you're gonna refinance right now at the rate and save $300, do it. If you're gonna purchase right now, hold off. Is that it?
Yeah, but I just don't think a lot of people that are coming back in and refinancing this quickly are the ones that are saving $300 in a lot of cases. It's the people that are saving like $65. I mean, some people are serial refinancers.
Yes.
Like, it's ridiculous. Like they get a 4% rate, then they'll do a 3.75, then they'll do a 3.25. I mean, you think I'm kidding? Guys, getting these mortgage guys, and they love it because they make money, right?
Correct.
So they don't care. They're not going to steer you away. But in essence, this person's saving like $6 each time, and they're not even taking into consideration the fact that they're adding 2 to 3% on their principal every time. So, I mean, if they want to do that, that's great. It's great to be at a dinner party and tell somebody you have an interest rate of 3.45, right? Because nobody really cares at the end of the day. But that person cares exponentially. So, and they've added probably over the course of a $400,000 loan, refinanced 3 times, probably added like 40 grand in principal on top of the original principal balance, right? And completely eaten up any equity they had just to sit at a dinner party and tell somebody they had a 3.45 rate. So, it's illogical, and there's a tactical way of doing everything, and then there's just an obsessive compulsive way of doing things. And I think the people that came storming in, with the first drop like a week and a half ago, were the ones that do it every single time the rates drop. If they have the equity in the property, it's just not the right way to do it.
Okay, well, right now, my people, we got some people that just said, it's a crisis. We will survive the crisis. Coronavirus is not a new thing. Then somebody talking about Iran, second to last country without the Rothschilds control central bank. So that's another, the Rothschilds.
Yeah, I'm not touching that.
Touch on that. Yeah.
But look, at the end of the day, like I said, we like to do these. We like to do these podcasts just kind of as to give people a little levity, because I think what happens right now, I mean, at least in this case, what's happening right now is people are just numb to what's going on. A lot of people have 401ks and they're getting torched because a lot, like we talked about last time, those 401ks are in large part index driven. So they're tied to like an S&P ETF, or if they're set up with Vanguard, they're tied with the Vanguard Commiserate. So the market's down 35%. That means if they're in a 60-40 split with 60% equities, 40% bonds, that means that let's just say for argument's sake, I'll just give you an example because this isn't an unreasonable example.
Okay.
Let's say a client had $100,000 401k or an IRA 3 weeks ago. Okay, and they were typically in a 60-40 split, which is fairly conservative. That means 60% stocks, 40% bonds. You blend it so that you just don't get rocked. That means 60% of that $100,000 was strictly in equities, right? So now that we've lost approximately 35%, 30 to 35%, that means that, and bonds got completely torpedoed too, so the ratio didn't even work. But let's just work from the stock side. That means that they were set up like that, they would have lost approximately $22,000. That $60,000 in stocks literally was just cut in half.
Oh, wow.
In 3 weeks. So all that. So now they're looking at and the bond side of it would have dropped too. It's percentage based, but I mean it would have dropped probably a rather significant percentage. So people think on the way up, it's nice to have exposure to these ETFs, but when you see these indexes drop, like the S&P, the Dow, and such, they're just coming down together. So when you see a 35% move in the Dow, you're seeing people's 401ks dump because they don't do individual stock picks in a lot of cases. They blend it out with the indexes. So the point I'm trying to make is a lot of people, even though they try not to pay attention in the times when it's going up, they hug that computer screen when the market's going down, right? And they're watching that.
Yes.
They're watching that IRA deteriorate every single day, and they're thinking, man, I'm putting 3% of my check towards this every week. What am I doing? It's the wealth effect. I talked about it last week.
Yes.
When the markets are up, people want to go out and spend money. They're more confident in spending money. When the markets tank, man, they go in a corner and hide.
Yes.
They don't spend money already. Now you're coupling with the fact you can't even leave your house. And you have to sit here and watch this stuff on TV all day long. I mean, people that don't do this for a living or understand it, I mean, they're shell shocked.
Yes.
I mean, they're miserable. So, I mean, I think we try to do this stuff just to give people a little bit of a peace of mind and provide some background to it, because it's not something that people understand. It's just not something that's taught, and it's not taught to the average consumer. And you're not ever going to get a mortgage guy that's going to tell you not to refi, because that's how he makes money, right?
Well, I just have someone right now that says, my current mortgage rate is 4.75%, 30 years. I won't be refinancing unless the rate drops to 2s.
But But that's good though. I mean, he knows what he wants. Whoever it is, a guy, girl, indifferent. At least they you know, it sounds like they may have done some arithmetic associated with it to arrive at that decision and that conclusion, right?
But you also saying that they won't go lower than 2, though.
I mean, that's my opinion. No, I don't think they're going to go much lower than the high 2s. No.
The high 2s.
But I mean, again, the 2 handle, maybe 2 3/4 up to 2.95 somewhere like that. You know what I mean? I think that's probably, in my personal opinion, because I don't see how they make money otherwise, right? Based on what I told you.
Correct.
Like based on the fact that there's a 75 to 80 basis point servicing fee when they sell these loans, and if you're at 275, that literally inflation adjusted before tax leaves the bank or Fannie and Freddie like 50 basis points to make on the loan. It makes no sense, right?
Yeah,
I'm not going to do that. There's no money there, right? So I think in the leanest of situations, the lowest you'll see. I mean, I'm not talking about an ARM here. I'm talking about a 30-year because I've already seen an ARM, a 7-year ARM at like 2 1/4, but that's done. I'm sorry. Yeah, it was 2 1/4, a 7-year ARM, but that's done totally differently, and it adjusts out. So after you get out of the ARM, it reverts up to the maximum rate. So it ends up being a blended scenario. So, but just a true 30-year, I would think is going to top out between 275 and 295. Now that doesn't mean somebody can't get in like a 7-year ARM where that could get down in the low 2s. Because I've seen it in the low 2s, and because of the adjustment after the ARM and how wickedly it jumps after the ARM, and it blends out for the one who's holding the note, it becomes more profitable if they carry it longer and they don't refi it. But whatever the case, again, I don't see the 30-year going much lower than that. So,
well, this person says he only owes $60,000 on the mortgage.
Oh, that's good. So then, in order for him to do it, it's got to be a much bigger drop then, right? Because obviously, if you're 475, then your payments roughly without taxes and insurance, you're talking about like 4.7 on 60,000. What's that for? 280s. Principal interest is probably 300 by itself, and if he drops it down to 2, you're probably principal and interest at 2.9. You're probably going to go to like 220. So you save like $70. That's from where he's at right now, it's about a 20% saving. That makes sense, right? I mean, it's all relative, but at the same time, that's why it makes no sense for him to go in at 3.5, right? He's going to save 20 points. He's going to save $20, and he's going to add another $3,000 on a $60,000 mortgage. It's just illogical. So
he said 492 including escrow.
Yeah, I wasn't including escrow. I was just including the principal and interest, which is probably around 300 on the 475 roughly. But I think I think just us trying to educate people more and more and understanding a lot of the stuff that goes on, I think can go a long way. I mean, I've had a lot of clients of ours that listen, and people that we're also associates with that listen, and everybody seems to get their piece out of it and understand things maybe they didn't entirely understand. So, I mean, that's obviously validating for the time we put into these as we continue to try and do more and kind of explain more and more to people. Yeah.
No, the person just said that you're spot on with those numbers.
Yeah. So, I think that though, I think the way he was looking at his rights, he was good because he put pen to paper, right? And he did it himself. You could tell because he understood. Because for him to say I'm not doing it into the 2s, it had to be some sort of a thing. So he would have had to have done the numbers in order to be able to arrive at that. Most people don't though. They'll just call up the mortgage guy, right, and be like, rate drop the point. Should I do it? Rate drop 75 basis points. Should I do it? And they're like, oh yeah, do it.
Yeah.
You do it. Yeah. Because who's going to say no, right? If you're that guy and you work off commission, I mean, you're not going to say no. So, I mean, I think just people getting a better understanding in times like this when it's not necessarily the most comfortable time in the market, when you can get a crash course or understand why things are happening or what to expect, and it's just not this giant question mark in a lot of cases as it could be. Maybe that provides a little bit of peace of mind for people, sometimes of stress,
You have an idea of what markets are going to get hit hard with this? Like
on the real estate side?
On the real estate side, yeah. Do you have like the usual?
Look, in my experience, look, right now, it wasn't like back in 06, 07 where certain markets. See, the reason why Arizona and Florida and DC and Vegas, why they all tanked early, because they were some of the first ones to tank, and they were some of the most aggressive ones to tank back when that happened. the reason why they tanked was because the increases in value over there were just so high. I mean, it was so speculative. It was like a commodity. It was just insane. And what ultimately ended up happening was over the course of that time, you know, they came down. They were the first ones to come down because effectively they were the first ones to go up, right? Like there was points in time in Florida, and this was before I was spending 9 months a year down here. I was only coming down here periodically, and there was points in time back in 08 or 9, 10, and whatever, when like they would get properties under contract before they were built. So they built condo buildings, and let's just say, like, this is how crazy it got. Let's just say somebody, you know, put a unit under contract on the 5th floor for $200,000, right? And you were speculating that by the time it was done being built, in let's just say 18 months, that was going to be worth $400,000. That would happen, and they turn around and just keep selling the agreements. So there was a speculative market that existed. By the time the guy bought it for $400,000, which didn't even end up happening because by the time the guy ended up building it, the market had already collapsed, right? But that agreement had changed hands like 3 times.
Oh,
right?
I remember those. Yes.
They were flipping just paper. There was nothing to it. They were just flipping agreements to a property that hadn't been built, that was under construction. That's how much speculation was in the air. Now, we don't have that now. But the one thing we have that exists in the market right now is the fact that it hung up there too long. See, for all the good things that were great about the last 3 or 4 years of the market continuing to go up, what happens is they took out the natural pullback that would exist in the typical market, right? There's a natural, healthy pullback without all this artificial Fed manufacturing of interest rates and things like that. There's typically in a normal environment, it's that's healthy and functioning properly. It'll naturally pull itself back when rates naturally go up, right? So rates will go up, and what will end up happening is, because there's a debt to income level, what will end up happening is values will start to come down because people can afford less, right, as interest rates go up. So it'll naturally bring property values down. And as you start to raise interest rates, people want to invest in CDs more, things that are less risky, right? So it'll start to move out of the stock market, and we'll see that start to naturally correct. These are natural corrections that occurred previously in history. The problem is that if you remember back in 18, the minute the Fed started to raise interest rates, people had a complete conundrum because there's just so much debt in our system now, because post 2008, everything was manufactured. All that free market was taken out of the system. And then we became, you know, a quote unquote manufactured free market where the Fed's having to intervene more now than they've ever intervened in the past. Yeah. We're having more of these breakdowns than we've ever had over a period of time, you know, because they're propping it up, you know, and you can only fight a free market so long, and it's effectively what they end up doing. So it becomes largely problematic, you know, and that's the point we're sitting at right now. So if this somehow, some way ends up being just a way to shake out all that nonsense and get us back to a true place of correction, then it'll be huge. It'll be huge everywhere. And I think that it'll end up giving a lot of people a lot of opportunity. The people I am most concerned about, though, quite honestly, outside of the debt stuff, is the people that buy FHA and they've bought in the last year or so, right?
Yeah.
Because that's FHA, you're putting 3.5% down, and then you got to figure you're paying, you know, on a purchase, you have to pay transfer tax. So you're paying anywhere from, and closing costs on a purchase might be 4 or 5% rather than 2 to 3 on a refi. So you're putting 3% down, but you're getting hit with 5% closing costs. So effectively, you're almost upside down on the loan when you first walk into it, right? And then if values tend to drop, then you're dealing in a situation where, let's just say you buy the average FHA home with $350,000, and you're financed at roughly with closing and everything, you're into it for $355,000, and you wake up and over the course of the next 18 months, the property value drops to $285,000. Well, you can't refinance to get that lower rate because you have no equity in the house.
Correct.
Right? And now you're like, if I got to get out of this house, I got to bring $70,000 to close on between the realtor commission. And now these people, just like they did in 08 and 09, they start saying this, then I'm not going to get anything out of it. And then you start having that whole conversation. So I hope it doesn't get to that point. I saw that point many, many times in 07, 08 with clients and people just making that decision, like, why am I going to pay for this if, you know, the property is underwater, right? Now, I hope that doesn't happen. I hope things stabilize and we don't see that again. But that is a valid concern of mine, because a lot of these people, this is a whole new band of borrowers that are coming in and supporting this FHA scenario, right?
Yes.
This isn't the same people that were walking in 08. Those people, you know, that they didn't put themselves in that position again, right? they walked into it. They felt the beat that they took back in 07, 08. And like I was saying, as a society, we got smarter. So you're dealing in a situation where now it's a whole different band of buyers, and those band of buyers are coming in and they didn't even consider any of that stuff because they didn't live through it. So unfortunately, they walked into situations not maybe taking that into consideration, doing what you said, overbidding on properties at a time when it was probably the worst time to do it. And now you're sitting in a situation where they could be the most susceptible potentially if the market starts to really pull back aggressively on the real estate side. So let's hope that doesn't happen, but it's a really, really valid and I think legitimate concern that could unfold towards the end of the year if things continue on the path that they're on.
Yes. No doubt. I mean, it's grim, but it's got to be told.
Listen, I don't think it's that. I don't think it's that grim though, because that exists in society all the time, right? It's just we don't talk about it when times are good. We see this stuff all day, every day, where sometimes people can't afford to pay their mortgage. Sometimes people choose to do it specifically. Sometimes people can't afford it. Any number of reasons that people do it. I just think that going into a situation where we're contracting as an economy, and you may see these things take place. I just think that the good thing now that they have, which they didn't have before, is they have these modification programs available now that are much better suited than they were in the past, and they're much more of a viable option. But even in those situations, though, it doesn't always put the individual back in significantly better terms. It might put the individual just back in the house and helps the bank a lot more than the individual sometimes. So whatever the case, I hope we don't see it, is what I'm trying to say. That's just it's a concern of mine, and it's one that's been a concern of mine since this all started unwinding, and I had talked about it before this started to happen, just as like that distant concern of mine, because you're just dealing with people that just haven't seen it and they don't understand it, and in their mind, real estate is just a safe investment. But there are situations when you buy at the top of a market when it's, and you leverage it to the moon. It's not the safest investment, unless you plan on staying there for the next 25 years, which most people in our society don't. And that's where the issue comes into play.
Correct. Anything else you want to touch on this, Jay?
No. I think I wanted to really just the goal was just to talk about the mortgage, the refi, and the purchase, because I've gotten that question a lot over the last 10 days about is it better to refi now? Is it better to purchase now? And I repeat, just so that in the event there's any confusion, right now I don't think it's the time to buy. I think you'll have much better opportunities over the course of time to buy at better prices with the same rates being the same. The rates will be the same or lower potentially. On a refinance scenario, I would absolutely jump on it because, again, the difference between a 3.25 30-year and a 2.7 30-year on a $200,000 mortgage is like $30. So you might as well lock in the equity right now in the event that real estate values drop. This way you can get more favorable financing terms and your underwriting can be a lot easier, as opposed to waiting down the line, which could add more things such as PMI if the loan to value exceeds 80% and such. It just doesn't make sense to wait for that. So I would say if you refi,
somebody just said the bureaus should reset also.
Yeah, no, that's not gonna happen. I think that the bureaus are completely disconnected from any of this stuff and have absolutely nothing to do with it.
Do you think they're there rubbing their hands with their mustaches?
No, because it's not. You understand? We talked about this. It's not like they're not like human beings running it. It's like it's an algorithm that runs the bureaus, right? So there's not some guy there like some evil genius that's figured out. You know what I mean? I mean there is, but it's not some guy that's actively like doing it. They go around and they try to get new accounts. I mean, it's mostly a sales and IT operation. That's it. I mean, it's all it is. And all of it's done algorithmically. So, I mean, or 90% of it's done algorithmically. It's not a fraud scenario. So yeah. I don't think you're going to see much sympathy from them in that capacity. So.
Well, most definitely this past couple of weeks, we've had an influx of business, and that may have a lot to do with people getting their tax money back or whatever. But some people are actually seeing opportunity too, and they're wanting their credit fixed.
But I do think over the course of the next, and I don't think I'm going out on a limb here. I do think over the next 3 to 6 to 9 months, I think that there's going to be a lot of there's going to be people that were over levered when the tide rolled out, right? And they're gonna need help.
Yes.
Pretty significant help, and we'll be happy to help them, whether it be settling accounts or working stuff out with creditors or just the credit stuff. We do all this stuff, tax issues, because I'm sure that's going to become a problem. A lot of people finance their taxes, their tax bill, right?
Yes.
And the IRS is not somebody you want to play games with. So a lot of that stuff, I think, if this continues, when you just see in the early stages how people are being exposed and how it's developing on a day-by-day basis, I hope it doesn't. But I do think no matter what transpires, I do think there's just like there was when the government shut down in 18, at the end of 18, there's going to be people that are going to be financially impacted by this on Main Street. You know what I mean? And we're happy to help anybody that needs that assistance. But at the same time, I think that if things continue down this path, they're going to need a reliable source to be able to do that with, where they knows what they're doing and can get it done right under the right terms, and that's something we'd be happy to help with.
When is the right time to do an inquiry removal, John? I have somebody who says, I'm interested in inquiry removal. I get people who contact me for inquiry removal all the time. And I'm like, I only got 6 inquiries. I only got 7 inquiries.
Well, you don't need to get them removed if you got 6 or 7 inquiries. But everybody thinks, because they say on these credit boards that any inquiry drops your score. Remember, we had that one client today that we were talking to that was like, "Oh, it's the inquiries that's keeping my score down." I'm like, no, it's not. It's not. I mean, and I'm not. Listen, I understand that with a lot of people, these credit boards are some of the only places that you can go to try and ascertain and obtain some degree of knowledge. But the problem is sometimes they're just so. They're the worst things you can possibly go to, because it's a group of people with the same amount of intelligence as you're walking in with that present it as though it's fact, when in reality it's nothing further than myth, and it's just dispelled myth in a lot of cases. So I would say for anybody that's trying to get inquiries removed, if you're going to go for new credit, I would say it would make sense to do it right before you're going to go for new credit, or right after you've applied for credit and gotten credit. But the problem is you can't dispute inquiries that are attached to unsecured credit cards, right? So you run the risk of closing the card. So if you were somebody that was fully successful in being able to do it,
correct,
it's gonna be largely problematic, right? And you're gonna basically be disputing inquiries that resulted in credit, and you can't do that because they're gonna close the card that you just fought hard to get. So, I mean, it's a little bit of a rub, but I think either before or after you get the credit, or both, would be the time to dispute the inquiries. I think randomly it's unnecessary, because it's just unnecessary. If you're not out actively looking for credit, there's no reason. But in all fairness, there shouldn't be an overwhelming abundance of just wasted inquiries. If you're not getting credit, there's a reason for it.
Correct.
So you need to be a little more cognizant of, and this isn't directed at the person that asked the question, this is a general statement.
Yeah, this is a general statement.
Yeah, so if you need to know what lenders pull what bureaus, and not look on a credit board, because they'll tell you it's regional or geographic. It has nothing to do with that. You need to do some research and find out what lenders pull what bureaus, what lenders are more in line with your type of credit file. If you're somebody that has a tarnished credit, you shouldn't be going to an A+ retail lender. They're not going to lend to you. I could save you the time in the inquiry. There's certain lenders that lend auto loans to subprime borrowers. Same idea. You're not going to get an auto loan from an A+ lender on an auto loan. They're not going to do it. That's why, there's an actual art to this. Certain bureaus post certain bureaus. You can actually certain creditors post certain bureaus. You can actually spread out your inquiries appropriately, so you're not heavy loaded like most people are on Experian, because they just go to all the retail banks, right? They'll just walk their way down. A lot of retail banks pull Experian. They'll just walk their way all the way down. They'll go to every single one, and they'll get denied by 90 of them, and they'll get approved by 1, and they'll consider it a victory. The problem is they've lost so many points as a result, because they ran so many inquiries,
correct,
far exceeding what is functional or even healthy. They run into a problem, and I think as a result of that, you deal in a situation where they just accumulate so much. So you should if you're going to go to the extent of going on these credit boards to get your knowledge or to get your information, I mean, take it a step further and actually just do the research. Don't rely on somebody else's opinion. You're obviously taking the initial step of trying to listen, or email us. We sell the funding system. The funding system details a lot of lenders that pull each bureau, even the $99 one. Each lenders pull each bureau. If you're a client of ours, we point you in the direction anyway of what lenders to go to at any particular point in time. And we save the inquiries. If you ever come talk to any one of our clients that we've helped with funding, we don't waste inquiries. I mean, when we put somebody through somewhere, it's like, go here. And even when they do it themselves, they get approved.
Correct.
It's not like we're like, oh, you could try this or try this or try this. And we just keep wasting and wasting and wasting, because that would be ridiculous. Because obviously that would be a waste of inquiries and only hurting the client. And our overall objective is to help the client. So again, I mean, I would say, as far as the best time, just to put a period on this, the best time to get them removed is obviously either before you go for any kind of funding to make the file look good, or after.
Well, he just said, my personal inquiries are for business credit that I was approved for. I was told that because they are for business, that they should be deleted from my personal credit.
And who told you? Who told you that?
I don't know who told you that. My main goal is funding. I went through my first round.
Right. Whoever told him that, or he or she, I'm not sure. Whoever told him that a business lender can't pull your personal credit, it should be removed, should not be talking about that then, because that's absolutely inaccurate. When you go for a business credit card or a business loan, unless your business can stand on its own 2 feet, and I'm not talking about an 80 Paydex either, by the way, because that's irrelevant at this point, at this stage in civilization. Unless your business can stand on its own 2 feet and get real legitimate loans, they're always going to personally guarantee it. It doesn't mean it shows up on your personal credit card or your personal credit report. So for instance, you go get a Bank of America business card, that's not going to show up on your personal credit report, that card. But the inquiry is because they ran your personal credit because you needed to meet a certain requirement, and you're going to personally guarantee it. So if you go bad on that card, they're going to throw that on your personal credit. They're going to throw that on your business credit as a derogatory item. So they not only, when they have the ability to collect, they can go after the business, and they can go after you in court if you don't pay on it. So anybody that told you that inquiry is irrelevant, unfortunately, they weren't. They either didn't know what they were talking about, or they were misleading you on purpose. I don't know. You would know better about who you went through and wherever that lies. But
he said it's Fund and Grow is the name of the company, I think.
Fund and Grow, yeah. So you're probably dealing with a sales rep that was probably just trying to sell business. And as a result, they weren't entirely accurate with what they told you. But they don't come off because of the fact that
it's not on your. It's not going to be on your credit report.
The account itself won't report on your credit report.
Correct.
But the inquiry will. And if you do dispute that inquiry, you do run the risk of them closing that business card. Same idea.
Black 12212. So be safe if you're going to do that inquiry with someone, because there are people out there who say, I could delete it in 1 week, and then they file fraud. Next thing you know, they close up your card and your inquiry's not in there. Was it worth it?
Or was it even necessary? Yeah, I mean, that's what it boils down to. All this stuff, a lot of this stuff where consumers shoot themselves in the foot, at least the ones that we deal with and the ones that come to us after they've done it, are things that are just done in excess and unnecessary. And honestly, I know it doesn't derive from their own position. Somebody told them something, much like this guy. Somebody told this particular individual that, you're not allowed to have business inquiries on your personal credit. That's ridiculous. I mean, it's completely ridiculous. I mean, there's no way to substantiate that. The fact that somebody said that, right? So now let's just say he didn't listen to us. Maybe he won't listen to us. But let's just say he didn't listen to us and didn't have somebody like us telling him the truth before, and he went and disputed that, or he hired somebody to remove it, and that guy did it, and then they closed his business cards that he just opened. What's he going to do then? What's he going to do? Because now there's only so many lenders that lend business cards. I mean, there's a finite amount of business card lenders. They're mostly the retail banks. Sure, some smaller credit unions will do it, but that's not their forte on the business side. It's the personal side. They don't expose themselves to a tremendous amount of risk. So now you just went through round one, air quotes, and you just went in, raised all this money. This guy tells you all the wrong information. You have somebody pipe through claim fraud to remove these, and now all your accounts get closed, and you do what? You think you go back to that lender again? That doesn't happen. That's an immediate turn down when you go back to them. So now what? You just cut your base down because some guy's a sales rep, he's trying to make $200 on a $15,000 line, right? And he's doing it to return you over. And that $200 means so much less to you than it does to him, because if he shuts these lines down, it immediately and directly impacts your business, right? And what you just raised. So I think people need to stop relying on these credit boards and really start understanding themselves, which is why we do this stuff. And I know he said it was that somebody at Fund and Grow that told him, but I know they have a lot of sales reps. So
Okay.
I
So
can only assume
someone
that
else said, so there is no such thing as no PG business dealing.
No. There is non-recourse loans that businesses extend. Okay, there's absolutely, but it is reserved for businesses that have established legitimate credit. Okay, so not like going and not opening a Granger account and finding two guys at Home Depot that own construction companies that report to D&B that you have 30-day pay terms for $200. I mean, that is not reality, and that's not real life. These are trillion-dollar capitalized banks. If you want what you're trying to describe, some of this stuff that you're describing that people advertise all the time about non-PG, if you want a Kinko's card, go for it. If you want unlimited Kinko's prints, I think you could probably get a non-PG card through there. Maybe a gas card. Correct. Maybe a card to rent videos. I don't know. Do they do that anymore? Anything that's unimportant, you could probably find a non-PG that is completely useless and has nothing to do with the day-to-day functioning of a business or the ability for you to get liquidity from it. Now, if you want to get a legitimate non-recourse loan, because they do provide them, you have to actually build up a business credit profile of paid-off loans through Experian business, Equifax business, TransUnion business, because they all offer business credit reports now, and that's who the lenders lean on now. They don't lean on entities that can be manipulated by paying them more money. What's that?
Duns and Bradstreet.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you can literally pay Dun & Bradstreet more money, and they make your file look better. But they make your file look better with like 30-day pay terms from a soda vendor. I mean, it's absurd. It's ridiculous. I mean, you would talk about manipulation. It's I don't know how it's not extortion. I mean, textbook legally it's extortion. But I mean, obviously the bureaus have caught wind of that because they basically enlisted the existing bureaus to start having their own business credit, which they lean on now. And they're the ones that report the real stuff you open. So if you have no business credit file, like legitimate, not Kinko's cards and Coca-Cola cards and gas cards, you have legitimate credit, then yes, you absolutely can get non-PG stuff. But it's not something that you can have some guy manufacture in the trunk of his car in a month. It just doesn't happen. That's not reality. That was reality maybe 5-6 years ago. And I think it's crazy people are still trying to sell it like that now, but that is not a reality now, unfortunately. So
when things happen, things tighten up, things change.
Whenever I say this to everybody, whoever asks me, anytime that there's a shortcut or a gap in the banking system that people haven't figured out a way to squeeze through, when that gap gets closed, that hole gets shut, and that hole doesn't ever open again. It gets bolted, cemented, sealed, and there's been a number of them over the course of time. Sometimes the banks aren't always out in front of these things, but once they catch up, it doesn't ever happen again. And this is no different. And if you notice, they have a totally different business credit reporting system since then, because this was all as a result of, if you go back and you guys can look this up, back in 2012, there was a number of individuals who started this syndicate where they were opening up these shell corporations, just opening up endless amounts of business credit cards, right? They were shell corps, and they were building up shell corps, and it turned into this enormous exposure for the banks. And this was like 12 or 14 people that did this. And once that happened, and they actually felt those losses, not like the standard losses that they get, when they felt it, and it was a number of different banks, that's it. That's the end of it. That is the epitome of that situation. You won't ever see it again, and this is no different. So yes, you can get non-PG funding, but you're only getting non-PG funding if you have a real business that makes real money and has paid off real loans and actually does it every day and can document it with tax returns and everything. Anybody that's telling you otherwise isn't telling the truth, unfortunately. And I'm not talking about cash advances, for the record.
No cash advance. We're not talking about cash advance.
Yeah, I don't consider that even lending. I don't even acknowledge that as a thing in civilization. So, I'm talking about like sustainable, like lending products, like business loans, SBA loans, business credit cards, etc. Like real ones where you can actually use for monetary purposes. Any of that is, non-PG. The only way you're pulling that off is like I said.
All right, you heard it first. I mean, you heard it a bunch of times already from us.
Yeah, we talk about it all the time, but yeah, it's not first, and it won't be the last. I assure you of that. But I mean, it won't be the last time I said it. But I mean, I'll repeat it every time, and I can easily prove it anytime. Because you know what? Here's the sad reality. old client of ours. This goes back to what we were talking about earlier.
Okay.
Where clients that we help, they reach back out every now and then. They ask funding questions. And this particular individual paid money to somebody who had said they'll build up their business credit and blah blah blah.
Yeah.
And they paid all the money. They got they did all the same stuff that was happened 5-6 years ago. He went and applied, and he said, "You know what? I knew." He goes, "I knew I was screwed after the first two." The first two cards they applied for were like a Lowe's business card and a Home Depot business card. He was like, "I'm not even in that." He goes, "I'm not even in that, and they're running my personal credit in order to do it." He goes, "I knew from that minute that it wasn't the way it was advertised. It was going to be different." And I said, "I wish you would have called me beforehand and not after the fact." But fortunately, he has us working on the inquiries to get him off now. But at the same time, it's a situation that just ends up, I mean, if it doesn't make sense in this kind of an environment nowadays, it's probably not real.
Correct.
But
a lot of people fall for the okie doke too, Jay.
Well, people fall for the okie doke because they don't know any better. It's not, and that individual tells them what they want to hear, right?
Correct.
So you get people there's certain people in society that would rather hear what they want to hear than hear the truth. And they'll go with somebody that'll tell them that they want to hear what they want to hear because they think that's reality. And unfortunately, they stay away from the person that tells them the truth. And they only come back to the person that told them the truth after they realize they told them the truth, right?
Correct.
And they'd rather get burned and go through it and realize that, somebody was giving them completely unselfish and selfless advice so that they don't harm themselves, but they did it anyway. So, you get it both ways. But I think that at the end of the day, I think, people over the course of time, this has been quite an evolving situation. To think about it, man. I mean, go back 6-7 years in this credit business, and that was in the very early stages, the infancy of it, and you didn't have those people that didn't believe it really happened. They were like, "Oh, it's a scam. You can't clean credit. It's not real. The only way you get good credit is you pay your bills on time." Which, look,
right.
I completely stand behind that, right? Like, I think you should pay your bills on time. Yeah. But in the instance when people run into stuff, there is an outlet, and it's called credit repair, and it's a real thing. Now, it took probably 4 years for that to, it wasn't until like 15, 16 that people started really embracing it, that it was a real thing, right? So it's constantly evolving, but you always have the bad actors that are in the situation, right? That are trying to figure out ways to get involved, but they're not necessarily doing it the right way. We try to do it the right way, and we try to educate people at the same time, and like I said, I finish every one of these podcasts up. We're not out here shoveling our service down your throat. I don't think we brought it up one time in this entire podcast. I don't think we bring it up much in any of the podcasts where we're trying to do any sales pitch, because
not really. I mean, we like for them to support us if eventually.
No, for sure. But you know what I'm talking about. If you look at a lot of these YouTube videos and stuff, I mean, it's all just pushing product, right? And that's not. I mean, these are like, I mean, these are just educational rants that I go on and you go on, where we try to inform people of where they can avoid problems. I mean, that doesn't necessarily, I don't even know, I got to be quite honest, I don't know how many clients any of these podcasts have really resulted in, but I don't really care. Correct. So, I mean, I'd like for it to, but at the end of the day, if it's just educating people and it's giving people a more of a level playing field, because I'm a firm believer, if there's a level playing field, people can ultimately make the decision that they think aligns with them appropriately, and then everybody's happy at the end of the day. If the individual makes the wrong decision after they find out, from an educated perspective, that the decision that they made was the wrong one after the fact, well, then they at least knew they were informed of all the pros and cons in that situation. They understood it, right?
Correct.
And I think right now there's a lot of situations where that's not the case, and they rely on the wrong people for the wrong information, and things just, get out of control from there. But either way, it is what it is.
All right, Jay. Well, no more questions. Facebook turned black already. We already got, an hour, 38 minutes. So, Jay, let's do our pitch right now. I mean, we've been doing credit repair 10 years. People start credit repair with us every day. People from all over 50 states and people who are even outside of the country looking to come back into the United States, and they want better credit. We are able to help them out. So you want to say anything aside from that?
No, I mean, we're going to try, like I always say at the end, we're going to try and do these podcasts, once a week, and continue to try and inform people up to date on things that obviously will be of importance to them and may assist them in making decisions. And if you know anybody that some of our information can assist with or provide them more clarity, by all means, please, kind of introduce them to this too, because we've made a lot of videos. A lot of them are all, or podcasts. A lot of them are all just as educational. So definitely send it around. If you need our help, we're here to help you. We're not going anywhere. We've been around for a long time. We're going to be around for a lot longer, only growing it even larger and into other areas and further ways of trying to help people get themselves back on track. So look forward to helping anybody who needs our help.
You got it. All right, John. Thank you, bro. Take care. Bye-bye. All right, my people on Facebook, thank you for those who logged on. A whole bunch of people on YouTube who always log on too. You already know. Thank you so much. Reaching out. As you see, John is knowledgeable. Not only is he a real estate investor, he's a business owner. He knows a lot about finance. I know you guys look at me and be like, does he know all that stuff? No, but I associate myself with people who are smarter than me, and I'll bring them over to you so you can learn something. So hope you all enjoyed the podcast today. Again, the best way you can help us. Hey, you want to buy me some coffee? I got my Cash App here in the description. I got my what do you want? What's the other one? My PayPal donations email. Again, if you are looking to do your own credit repair, we have a $99 do-it-yourself credit repair system. If you purchase that, you're definitely helping us out. And of course, I think all of our products have some type of support in them, so you're not left alone during the process of you wanting to do things for yourself. All right, so I'm gonna see you guys later. Take care. Hey, wash your hands, and I know you got a lot of toilet paper, so wash your ass too. All right, and don't get caught slipping. You already know. Don't be touching your face. All right. Touching stuff on the side when you come home. Take off your shoes. All right. My wife gets on me all the time. I walk around, take off my shoes like this. You hear? Sneezing. Hatch. Wash your hands 20 seconds and then moisturize if you can. Keep drinking stuff. Keep drinking. Moist your throat. Okay, you need to moist your throat throughout the day. So keep drinking liquids. All right, got my elderberry syrup. I got my sea moss. I have a sea moss. I'm on a healthy tip now and forever. And of course, eating rice and beans. Quarantine, this steaks, this and that. Man, we got no time for that. Rice and beans, eggs, rice, refried beans, tortilla. Come on, man. You survived this. All right. So everybody's laughing over here on Instagram, on Facebook. I mean, on YouTube. Listen, I'm going to see you later. Thank you so much for watching. And again, don't get caught slipping. Peace out.